I chose to report on how mechanization could significantly increase agricultural productivity in sub-Saharan Africa. Agriculture is very important in sub-Saharan Africa because more than 60% of the population consists of smallholder farms. 23% of sub-Saharan Africa GDP comes from agriculture, and agriculture is a main source of labor in sub-Saharan Africa. Africans farm for their own food to feed their families, and then whatever is left over, they are able to take to market for a potential profit. The conditions in sub-Saharan Africa are not very good, considering farming in Africa is very labor intensive and they do not use mechanical instruments. 70% of women grow food on smallholder farms in Africa with nothing but their hands and tools like hoes. Sub-Saharan Africa has little access to the power grid, and according to the World Bank, only 48% of the entire population has access to electricity. The average poverty rate for sub-Saharan Africa stands at about 41%. 41% of the entire population lives below the poverty line. Poverty rates directly correlate to the lack of mechanization and overall low productivity of agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa. Currently, mechanization levels on farms across Africa are very low. There are only about 1.3 tractors per 1,000 hectares of cropland in sub-Saharan Africa, and this number has actually dropped from 2 since 1980. The cost of labor in sub-Saharan Africa is much less than the cost of machinery. Therefore, there is really no incentive to purchase these tractors when farmers can just pay a ranch hand or farm hand to do the work that a tractor could do. This is a major issue though, because the African population is growing. It is expected to double by 2050, and farming without machinery will not yield enough product to feed the population. Farmers' earnings are also much lower than they could be if agriculture was mechanized and that they could perform at their highest efficiency. Africa imports an immense amount of food when they could be the breadbasket of the world. $35 billion is spent annually on imports. Africa has a great farming potential, but they just are not efficient. Sub-Saharan Africa can become mechanized, however. The first step to this is coming up with a strategy that can be implemented so that sub-Saharan Africans are persuaded to become mechanized. This starts with commercially oriented smallholder farms. They can be a good market for machinery. Developing mechanization simply for survival farming is not suitable. However, a mechanization strategy should be targeted at the commercially oriented farms. Financing also plays a major role in the reason why Africa is not mechanized. It is up to policymakers, developmental professionals, private investors, and the government to develop a sustainable financing model for sub-Saharan African farmers. They're definitely going to need help from outside entities because most of them live below the poverty line. Farmers can also form a cooperative and purchase the machinery as a group and then all use it together. Overall, sub-Saharan Africa has immense agricultural potential. It is held back, however, because farming practices are mostly laborious. If sub-Saharan Africa was able to use machinery for their farming needs, they would become more food secure, rely less on imports from other countries, and ultimately become more efficient. I chose this topic because here in the United States, we often take for granted the luxuries we have, such as electricity and farm equipment. It's hard to wrap my mind around the fact that it's 2020 and there are regions in the world that do not have access to electricity and that have to use their own labor to get farm work done. We are extremely productive here in the United States because we have access to farm machinery and technology. I believe that if Africa had these same tools, they could produce even more crop yield than the United States. I hope that sub-Saharan Africa is able to gain access to machinery and electricity soon. I think with the emergence of renewable energy sources, these sources will be much more affordable for Africans and they might be able to gain electricity soon.